Good evening, everybody. Brian Neubert here from goldenblack.com, live in Mackey Arena in the John Wooden Room. The lights are off out on the court already, so I am here in the Wooden Room. It's not all made of wood. I know that might have been confusing, but this is your goldenblack.com wrap video following Purdue's 87-78 win over number 2 Alabama. Thank you to the Purdue Club Hotel for your support. As always, we appreciate it very much. Purdue was ready for a court storming, but there was no court storming. I think Purdue, probably expects things to go their way at this point in games like this, and I never thought that was really something that was possible. Anyway, as you know, Mackey Arena is what you might call a terror dome for visiting teams, and that much was true again for one of the highest ranked team to come in here in non-conference play since UCLA back in the 60s, according to what I was told in the media room by one of my colleagues. Shout out to them. I can't remember who it was, but so that. Alabama comes in number 2. They're a legitimate, Final Four national title contender. But this is a hard place to play. And Purdue's pretty good too. I think Purdue, really validated itself here tonight as a potentially great team again this season. I don't think that necessarily surprises those of us who pay the closest attention to that, but I think everybody got to see it tonight. And I think everybody got to see Trey Kaufman-Renn tonight, and I am proud tonight to have been his only preseason All-Big Ten vote. He did exactly tonight what I figured he would do at some point this season. Scores 26 points against an elite team, 4 assists, no turnovers, was the epitome of go-to guy. By go-to guy, I mean the guy Purdue's looking for. The guy Purdue wants to put the ball in the hands of. The guy who can always find a good matchup or at least make the right basketball play in key situations and things like that. And he was all of that and more. 26 points, 4 assists, no turnovers on a high volume of touches for a post player. 0 turnovers. Really, really jumps off the box score at you. Drew 5 fouls, made his only 3-pointer. It was a desperate heave in the first half. I wouldn't even call that a 3-pointer. I'd call it a prayer answered. But just an elite game by Trey Kaufman-Renn. Purdue has now closed out 2 games in a row, 2 highly competitive games in a row. Yale and now Alabama. And one of those things is not like the other. With Trey Kaufman-Renn playing the 5, ultimately I think you're going to see that become Purdue's best lineup. How viable it is at both ends of the floor, I don't know. But it's been good enough to close out these last 2 games. The second of which came against the number 2 team in the country, a returning Final Four team with a bunch of 25-year-olds running around on the floor. So it was. It's obviously been effective. Trey Kaufman-Renn has obviously been effective. I want to talk about Fletcher Loyer again. I know I talk about his value a lot. I just think it should be amplified. I think that in the first half, he kept Purdue. I don't want to say kept Purdue in this because Purdue led the whole first half for the most part, but points were hard to come by. Lineups were kind of jacked up by foul trouble. He obviously makes the buzzer-beating 3, which was the reason Purdue led at halftime. But before that, he made a couple other plays, including that drive and kick to Riley Burgess for that 3 that he made. He got to the basket once for a mid-range miss that got put back by Burgess again. Again, I'm telling you, those little mid-range runners are highly reboundable misses against a scrambling defense. Those are valuable misses. He made another 3 on top of all the stuff I talked about before. He's just such a stabilizing force for an offense that, kind of needs that equilibrium at times. They're asking Braden Smith to play 1,000 miles an hour. Lawyer's poise, Lawyer's craftiness is really a nice counterbalance to everything else going on with this offense around him. And he's been really productive. He's been really efficient. He missed his first 2 threes and then made his next 3. So that's not going to kill his 75% shooting percentage too badly from three-point range. just a great game from him once again. Miles Coleman and Camden Heide. I don't know. I mean, we're obviously going to talk a lot about CJ Cox. We'll get to him later, but it doesn't. I mean, you watch the game, I assume. Assuming you have Peacock, maybe you don't. Maybe you opened your Peacock app and got distracted by Yellowstone or Alf or something. I don't know, but if you saw this game, you saw that this was the CJ Cox game. It shall forever be remembered as the CJ Cox game. I've always said about Purdue Indiana games here, there's always some rando who does something over their heads and makes that game the Sterling Carter game or the Basil Smotherman game or the Bryson Scott game, whoever it might be. This was the CJ Cox game because those 3 threes he made in less than a minute might have been the difference in this game. They certainly lit this building on fire, not literally, figuratively. But we'll talk a lot about CJ Cox. I already did, I guess. But Miles Coleman and Camden Heide, I think the combination thereof, I think we can lump those guys together a little bit because I think they're both in similar situations where they're they have to really carve their niche on this team as it's constructed, and that niche may be something different from what they're normally niching. And I think both of those guys are doing a lot of winning stuff that's maybe not necessarily aligned with their lifelong basketball identities. Camden Heide's always been a big-time athlete. His athleticism has been his thing. I mean, he was a really good high school player. He could make threes, things like that, but he is now a power forward. And when I don't just mean he's playing the 4, I mean he looks like a power forward. You can hear me banging on the tabletop here. To underscore the point, he looks like a power forward now. He is big, he is strong, and for him to come in 23 minutes and get 8 rebounds for a team that can't rebound was just an enormous deal. On top of the big three-pointer he made, too, off that nice look from Trey Kaufman-Renn passing across the floor. But for him to be the spark on the glass that he's been, there was a big offensive rebound in there, too, at one point in time that led to a Purdue basket. That's precisely what Purdue needs from him. I've been writing about that all summer, is that if he can just be an energy guy on the glass, good things are going to happen for him. Energy gets rewarded in basketball. Productivity finds the people who try the hardest. And when you're athletic and you're strong like he is, and you just bust your ass on the glass, that rhymes. Good stuff's going to happen. And that's precisely what happened for Camden Heide tonight, and consequently, that's precisely what happened for Purdue tonight, because those 8 rebounds were a huge part of Purdue closing this game on a really, really emphatic rebounding run after Alabama had basically had its way. I think at one point in time it was 29-20 on the glass in Alabama's favor, which is just completely counterintuitive to everything you've come to expect as a Purdue basketball follower, because you've been able to take these elite individuals for granted. Rebounding, was sometimes a concern, but not always, because you always had, you always had Thanos at the rim, or you always had Travion Williams, or you had Isaac Haas taking up tons of space. He didn't get many rebounds, but he took up a ton of space. Or you had, whoever it might have been, Juwan Johnson jumping over people. But this is not going to be a very good rebounding team. This is going to be, I shouldn't say that yet, because they can always surprise, but they're going to have to play above their heads. It's going to have to be effort. It's going to have to be everyone doing something to contribute to the rebounding effort collectively. Camden Heide getting 8 in 23 minutes is precisely what I'm talking about. Miles Coleman, this is a guy who his whole life, and I covered his last 2 years in high school and AAU. I'm aware of what he was before that even. This guy has been a scorer and an athlete his whole life, and it has not been counterweighted all that often by a lot of the winning substantive types of stuff that he is starting to do at Purdue. The defense, the big contributions in big games, the rebounding. He is just this is one of the most eye-opening developments of the season, is what he has become as a player in terms of a two-way substantive player, and not just a guy who has minimal value when he doesn't come in and make 2 threes in the first minute he's in. He didn't take a shot in this game, and it doesn't matter. He played great. He was a huge part of this win, and he didn't take a shot. He blocked 2 shots. He had an assist. He did not turn the ball over. He defended well. He's a switchable defender. He can guard guards, but he's rebounding, and that's really important, because when you're the most athletic guy on the floor, as he almost always is, and you're pretty big, and you can jump higher than people, if you try as a rebounder, you're going to get some rebounds. If you're being physical, if you're being tenacious as a rebounder, you're going to get rebounds. And that is precisely what Purdue has needed from him this season. That's the step they needed him to make. If he keeps doing that, the offense is going to come. He's going to find his way into open threes. He's going to find his way into transition opportunities. He has been really, really good this season, in a different way than anybody probably ever would have expected. And that's as eye-opening a development as probably anything that's happened so far this season. I know he's not one of Purdue's 5 starters or whatever it is, and Purdue has its hierarchy of its 3 best players well established, but his growth into a really, really critical piece of this team has, again, really been one of the more eye-opening developments of this young season to date. This win just spoke volumes about Purdue's program, not just this team. I mean, when you look at what Purdue has done these last 4 or 5 years in terms of non-conference play, forget the winning streak for a second. Look at the people you've beaten. Alabama is number 2 in the country, right? In Connecticut years ago, you beat Villanova, you beat North Carolina. In Portland the year after that, you've beaten Gonzaga, you've beaten Duke, you've beaten Arizona on a neutral floor, NCAA tournament, and Maui last year. You beat Tennessee twice, you beat Gonzaga again. These are the best programs in college basketball, and Purdue's beating all of them. Now, it's not going to be infinite. It's not going to go on forever. I thought tonight was going to be the night that Purdue is finally going to lose a non-conference game, but I was wrong, as I frequently am. I just thought that all their 23-year-olds versus a team that's actually playing freshmen now was going to be too much for Purdue, and I was mistaken. I did not have CJ Cox making 3 threes in the second half in less than a minute on my bingo card for tonight, but that's precisely what happened. And, CJ Cox damn near outscored Mark Sears. It's a funny game, man. And when you build a good program and you recruit good players and you play the game the right way, this stuff just keeps on keeping on, so to speak. And Purdue's got a great thing going here as a program, and tonight was another reflection of that. And Alabama's going to go on and have a great year. They are really good, and they are really old, and they are really skilled, and they're going to have a great year. But this was a great night for Purdue, obviously, and just kind of more of the same. I mean, you almost sort of, if you're a fan, I'd imagine you almost kind of take it for granted to the point where Purdue loses at Marquette this week. You're going to freak out because you haven't seen one of these losses in years. But tonight was a really good night for Purdue, obviously. No court storming. That doesn't surprise me one bit. But Purdue was ready for it. And that's a funny little way for Purdue to kind of subtweet everybody who wasn't ready for it every time Purdue's lost on the road in the Big Ten the last couple of years. But, great win for Purdue, and perhaps you don't want to say a turning point because they were never turned in the wrong direction. Something for them to build on, a reason to believe, hey, we are as good maybe as some of these teams that came before us, and a huge confidence booster if one was needed for these freshmen and for these backups. For Camden Heide and Miles Colvin's effort to be rewarded with winning games like this, that's a big deal. For CJ Cox and Jakari Harris to experience success to the point where maybe this becomes their standard, That's a pretty big deal. And that's how good cultures are built. That's how great programs are built. And this video is going on way too long, so we're going to cut it off right there. I don't know if you can see this NBA game in the background here. I hope not. That's copyrighted material, and that's the risk I run every time I come in here to do this. But this is Brian Neubert from goldenblack.com, following Purdue's 87-78 win over number 2 Alabama. Thank you for watching. Thank you for reading. Thank you for listening. And thank you for processing our materials, however it is you process our materials. And I hope these fluorescent lights beating in your eyeballs haven't caused you any trouble. Thank you once again to the Purdue Club Hotel. You are the best. You always have been and you always will be. We appreciate your support as always, and I will talk to you guys again this week following Purdue's game at Marquette. And I'll talk to you on our goldenblack.com Saturday simulcast also tomorrow following Purdue football's game against Penn State. We're having to get pretty creative on that one. If you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe, all that stuff. So we would appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.